to begin with a land acknowledgement. Please place your feet on the ground and breathe the air at your location. We acknowledge that we're gathering today from coast to coast to coast on the lands of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their governments. Though we are meeting virtually today, we acknowledge that the head office of the CSLA is in unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and that Saskatoon, where we will be meeting in June, is Treaty 6 territory, which encompasses the lands of the Cree, Dakota, Nakota, Saulteaux, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We are thankful to work and live on these lands. Nous aimerions commencer par une reconnaissance des terres. Veuillez poser vos pieds sur le sol et respirer l'air à votre emplacement. Nous reconnaissons que nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui d'un océan à l'autre, sur les terres des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis et de leur gouvernement. Bien que nous nous réunissons virtuellement aujourd'hui, nous reconnaissons que le siège social de l'AAPC se trouve sur un territoire algonquin et anishinaabe non cédé, et que Saskatoon, où nous nous réunirons en juin, est le territoire du traité numéro 6, qui englobe les terres des Cris, des Dakota, des Nakota, des Saulteaux et la patrie de la nation métisse. Nous sommes reconnaissants de travailler et de vivre sur ces terres.
EPD stands for Environmental Product Declaration. So this is a document that displays the environmental impacts of a product all the way through its life cycle, from raw material through end of life. It displays things like carbon footprint, energy and water usage, and waste generation. Maglan is offering them because we want to be transparent about our environmental impact. We're committed to sustainability as a core pillar of our business, and EPDs allow us to find the hot spots along our supply chain and then actively work on reducing where our impacts are highest. EPDs are an important sustainability tool. They are third-party registered and verified, so you can be sure the information is accurate and credible. They're sort of like a nutrition label for food. They help customers be informed about the products that they buy, and we can make informed choices about the products that we're creating. EPDs are a really important sustainability tool. They help our customers understand the sustainability of a product through actual data and metrics. Because they're standardized, they're really useful in comparing one product to another through their environmental footprint. EPDs are also really important for our customers who are looking to reduce the carbon footprint of a project or achieve net carbon zero, because they can see the greenhouse gases released during the manufacturing process and then make changes to reduce that at their site. Currently, EPDs contribute credits to both LEED and site certifications. Maglan offers EPDs for our bike racks and our benches. By the end of April 2022, we will have waste and recycling receptacles, tables, chairs, and cluster seating as well.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this virtual event. My name is Chris Grosset. I'm the president of the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. We're very grateful to have you join us here at this event hosted by the Saskatchewan Association of Landscape Architects, who have also put together a wonderful Congress that is planned in Saskatoon in person for June 15th to 17th. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual Congress kickoff and the opportunity to hear from our guest speakers, keynote speaker Florence Williams, and educational session leader Michael Van Housen. The Congress theme for our future is explored in these lectures that address human health and well-being and ensuring that all people have access to the environments that help them thrive. This Congress theme also ties very closely to the CSLA's mission areas, reinforcing the importance that landscape architecture plays in planning and design for human health and well-being, environmental sustainability, and inclusivity in the public realm. I want to take a moment to thank the Planning Committee for the CSLA-SALA event, co-chairs Michelle Tustin and Trevor Tumak, our tour committee Amanda Lang, Program Scientific Committee Stephanie Wilkinson and Christine Baczynski, Board Representative Lorraine Snook, and our CSLA staff, Michelle Legault and Catherine Veluso. The CSLA and SALA really look forward to seeing you in person in Saskatoon when we return to the Congress. Please do register and join us in Saskatoon on June 15th to 17th. Thank you very much.
So hello, good morning, and good afternoon. I am Brad Wilson, the president of the SALA, or SALA as we call it. I would like to thank everyone for attending the virtual event today, and I hope you're all as excited to hear Florence and Michael speak as I am. A big thank you goes out to the 2023 Congress Planning Committee for all their work to date, for all the upcoming work to finalize the last few details, and for all the volunteer hours that will be spent at the Congress itself. Thank you again. I also wanted to take this chance to note a few initiatives that our SALA committees have been working on. In 2022, our SALA Academic Award Committee started a subcommittee to help fundraise for our academic award. We believe assisting students is an integral part of the association because they must travel outside of our province to study. The goal was to double our current endowment and to double our annual scholarship amount. This team put in an amazing effort and were able to fundraise over $25,000 through the generosity of members, friends, corporate donations, as well as matching funds from SALA. Although doubling the endowment may take a few years, we anticipate the scholarship will double in 2023 to $3,000. So on a side note to this, one of our lifetime members, CSLA fellow Cam Patterson, he will be donating his artwork for a fundraiser at the Congress. This is something that he has done for many, many years. Our Practice Review Committee has been working diligently to launch our continuous learning program as mandatory for the latter half of 2023. This program has been operating on a voluntary basis for many years, so we are excited to get this turned to mandatory. We anticipate this coming online very soon. Our Legislation Committee continues to work on a strategy to pursue legislative aim for self-regulation. Working with other committees, they are continuously revising and creating policies and programs that will help our efforts in the near future. So now that you know a little bit about our SALA membership, I would like to use this opportunity to invite everyone to attend the in-person conference in Saskatoon from June 15th to 17th, where you will get the chance to meet new peers, reconnect, mingle, and enjoy the prairie hospitality. We will have a group of enthusiastic volunteers ready to put in the best in-person conference ever, at least this decade for sure. We have amazing venues located downtown close to the river, a great list of local keynote speakers, engaging panelists, and exciting tours in and around the Saskatoon area. I am personally excited for the urban tree panel discussion and the Meewasin Valley bike tour. I'm so thrilled to be part of this, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Tustin, one of the co-chairs for this year's Congress. We are thrilled to be hosting the CSLA Congress here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan on Treaty 6 territory. And this year's theme is For Our Future, creating environments for thriving communities. For our future, it seems like we've been thinking more about our future every day. The last 3 years of adjusting to the pandemic and recovering from quarantine. Health and well-being have become an important focal point in our personal lives, our businesses, and municipalities. During this unusual time filled with uncertainties, closures, and social distancing, people were seen enjoying the outdoors more than ever. Parks, beaches, and green spaces were packed, maybe a little bit too packed, as places of respite, healing, and gathering. Often taken for granted, the pandemic enforced the importance of accessible outdoor green space, and conversations about mental health and well-being became more important than ever. Now, looking at a new world with fresh eyes, landscape architects have been tasked, as we have, with creating ways for society to flourish outdoors, for family fun, for exercise and relaxation, and for the overall well-being of our communities. Our 2023 CSLA-SALA Congress explores the different ways in which landscape architects design for our future, and what ways we create environments for people to thrive. Important topics of consideration are health and well-being, play and playfulness for all generations, and the diversity of landscape and urban design that meets the needs of different diverse cultures. We look to our past to make better decisions for our future generations and to create sustainable environments that bring joy and good health into our daily lives. We have an excellent lineup of keynote speakers this year, including Candace Savage, Jolie Big Eagle Kikwedewe, and Florence Williams, who I will be introducing shortly as part of our virtual event. These women are successful authors, artists, and all advocates of well-being through our connection to the natural world. We are so honored to have them speak for us, to discuss well-being in landscape architecture with them, and for really them to inspire us this year. Our educational sessions involve a range of topics from equity and inclusion, introducing nature and expanding on urban canopy in our cities, conservation and climate change, healing places, small projects with big impacts, to community and festival spaces. We have a great program of exhibitors for the 2023 Congress Trade Show, so be sure to check out their booths while you enjoy a cocktail reception on Friday, June 16th, and for breakfast on Saturday, June 17th. We have incredible tours as well, exploring award-winning landscape architecture projects such as River Landing in Wanuskewin, along with other beautiful urban and natural areas in and around Saskatoon. Tours include a river cruise, biking and walking tours, and bus accommodation to explore places like Batoche National Historic Site and Restoring 71. For those seeking libations, enjoy the Pedal Pub while exploring Saskatoon's downtown, or take a trip to the Black Fox Distillery for a private tour, cocktails, and premium gin sampling. It's very good. We know it's been a long time since we were able to get together, and we have worked hard to make this year's Congress not only an educational event, but a social one as well. We hope to see you here in Saskatoon starting Thursday, June 15th, with our welcome reception set inside our modern art gallery, overlooking the scenic and very activated Meewasin River Valley and South Saskatchewan River. Now to introduce Florence Williams. Florence is a journalist, author, and podcaster. Her first book, Breasts, A Natural and Unnatural History, received the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in Science and Technology and the 2013 Audie in General Nonfiction. The Nature Fix was an Audible bestseller and was named a top summer read by J.P. Morgan. Her latest book, Heartbreak, was called Showstopping and Courageous by Publishers Weekly. She is a contributing editor to The Outside magazine and a freelance writer for the New York Times and numerous other publications. A fellow at the Center for Humans and Nature and a visiting scholar at George Washington University, Florence's work focuses on environment, health, and science. A certified forest bathing guide and experienced workshop leader, Florence loves leading groups through nature immersive experiences and watching the transformation, connection, and healing that results. Florence serves on the board of two of her favorite nonprofits, the Trust for Public Land and the Ted Scripps Fellowship in Environmental Journalism. So after reading The Nature Fix and bookmarking most of the pages, I am especially excited that Florence is with us today to help us explain the science as to why connecting with nature, retaining, protecting, planting trees, as well as conservation work are so integral to the health of our modern lives. So please help me welcome Florence Williams.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And it is so nice to be here with you today. I am a huge fan of landscape architects. I feel like you make an enormous difference in especially our urban lives. And I think bringing nature into cities is, of course, going to be one of the fundamental and critical challenges of the 21st century. So it's an honor to be with you here today, and thank you for inviting me. I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the things I learned while researching my book, The Nature Fix, particularly in the realms of neuroscience. And I think that the data has sort of more relevance now than ever because of the incredible mental health challenges that we are under. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. I came to this topic, like so many of my topics, because of personal interest, things going on in my own life. And I was at a point where I was very lucky for 24 years to have a view like this outside of my back door. This is the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And I had almost an hourly sort of connection to nature. But then my family up and moved to the heart of Washington, D.C. And I ended up with a backyard view that looked like this. And to get to my daily nature trail, I had to go over this freeway, this chain link fence, lots of graffiti. I would get that down to the path of the C&O Canal, which is a National Park Service unit. It's actually a beautiful path, but there are low flying jets every 90 seconds. I never knew I was someone who was sensitive to noise pollution until I moved to Washington, D.C. And in fact, I felt in general like a stress bomb went off in my brain. I became very interested in the ways that our external landscapes get reflected in our internal emotional landscapes. And the way that I do journalism is I often test some of the science on myself. I sometimes participate in studies as a way to talk about them. And in these photos here, I'm testing my cortisol level, just stress hormone. It can be a stress hormone. I'm also testing my heart rate variability after taking a hike. And I'm also wearing a portable EEG cap, measures electroencephalography. And I wore that much to my children's embarrassment in many settings around Washington, including picking them up from school on occasion. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we're seeing from some of those findings. The first place I went for Outside Magazine, which assigned me to write about the science of your brain on nature, was Japan. Because in Japan, there was sort of active science going on, particularly looking at this practice of forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku that became popularized in Japan in the 1980s as a response to stress. And researchers were finding that in subjects who spent just 15 minutes walking around a forest or sitting in a forest, that they saw this significant drop in blood pressure, a drop in heart rate, and a decrease in the stress hormone cortisol. And at first I was skeptical of this because we know that exercise, of course, is really great for all of those measures and for mood, which also was shown to be boosted. But researchers sent people to walk around urban landscapes for the same amount of distance, same amount of time, really only saw these benefits in the forest walkers. And eventually I realized there was enough emerging science that there was a whole book here. And so I was fortunate to go around the world. National Geographic was also very interested in this topic on the anniversary of the US park system. And I thought this audience might enjoy this. This is from a horticulture therapy program that I visited in Denmark. And in Northern Europe, like in much of the industrialized world, there's a tremendous problem with burnout. Not a term that we used to use very much in this country, but I've noticed it's coming back in a big way in the United States anyway. And this program is a 12-week program. The people who go through it, who are suffering from burnout, really severe depression, they're not able to go to work. After 12 weeks, they have a 60% return to work rate, which is the most successful of all of the interventions that they do in Denmark. There's a long waiting list. It's paid for by the government. And sometimes when people first get there, it's all they can do to just kind of lie around, frankly. but it's very healing. It's very healing to lie around when you're surrounded by plants and by clouds, and when your senses can start to wake up. And in fact, what's really notable about this approach as a therapy, and also it relates to what they were finding in Japan, which is that when we can engage all of our senses, or as many of them as possible, that it's really a shortcut to restoration. It really puts our nervous systems in a different, more relaxed state, gets us kind of out of the ruminative thinking in our brains. And so this is in that same garden. Here, the participants are working with plants directly. I just love this quote from Emerson, suggesting an occult relationship between man and vegetable. I thought that was kind of perfect. This is another kind of room in this therapy garden. There are many spaces for reflection, also many spaces to kind of soak up some of these different ways to engage our senses in the environment. And this photo is actually taken from, this is one in Sweden, actually, and it's from an Alzheimer's study. And some of the research is suggesting that when Alzheimer's patients have access to these gardens, they actually request and need significantly less medication for things like anxiety and agitation. So you can tell this is really a beautiful space. And of course, some of these concepts are working their way into workplaces. This is actually from a Google headquarters in Zurich. And it's a funny photo to me because I'm kind of worried about the computer, you know, that these plants might be dripping on top of it. And this is from a very interesting study some of you may have heard about in Philadelphia, in which University of Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia Horticulture Society partnered to convert 500 vacant lots into kind of more manicured and clean and pleasant green spaces. Some of these lots were assigned that kind of transformation. Some of them stayed the same. What the data showed was that there was a 40% drop in rates of depression reported by people who lived within a quarter mile of these greened lots. And interestingly, gun violence, huge problem in our country, my country, dropped 17% around these vacant lots that had been greened. So from large-scale epidemiological studies, we know that people who live within just 1 kilometer of green space show this lower incidence of 15 stress-related diseases. They show lower mortality rates. They don't die as quickly. A Spanish study found higher birth weight babies, healthier babies, and a nurses study, very large nurses study out of Harvard showed a 13% drop in depression, also similar drop in respiratory illnesses in the nurses who lived in the highest quintile of green space compared to the lowest quintile of green space. And by the way, all of these studies have adjusted for income and wealth. So you would think that doctors would be paying attention to some of these studies, and in fact, they are beginning to. In the United States, we have at least a sort of last search about 73 hospitals or clinics that are prescribing nature. One of them, the Unity Health Hospital System, has a program in which I think it's 180 doctors reaching 100,000 patients are actively prescribing time in parks to their patients, especially their pediatrics patients. Interestingly, we know there's an epidemic of childhood obesity, diabetes, anxiety, and depression. And we're seeing some really interesting data coming from some of these studies. So of course, the question is why? I'm going to run through some of these slides pretty quickly. Again, it seems to be because our nervous systems really adapt kind of wonderfully and happily to being in comfortable and pleasant green environments, or natural environments, I should say. Ed Wilson, the late Harvard entomologist, used the term biophilia. We evolved outside. Our perceptual systems, our visual cortex, our olfactory cortex, they are just comfortable reading natural landscapes. And so subconsciously, we relax because we can understand what these environments are telling us. And then I also found, as I traveled, that different scientists had some very different sort of pet theories about why we felt so good outside. This is Dr. Ching Li, and he believes it's all about these aerosols emitted by trees. For example, the Hinoki cypress emits these wonderful chemicals, these compounds called phytoncides, and he's shown that these phytoncides help lower our blood pressure and also seem to increase our own killer T cells in our immune system up to 30% after we spend time in a forest or in a hotel room that's misting these Hinoki cypress compounds. And he recommends that people go to a forest, at least once a month, because our immune cells stay elevated for up to 30 days. But if you can go once a week, he says that's even better. The other psychologists I talked to say, oh, it's actually about the color green. There's something about the color green, also the color blue, that makes us feel safe. We can get what we need in these environments, according to our deeply evolved systems. But you can also see there's fractal patterns in these particular ferns. And we also see fractal patterns in forests, in clouds, along shorelines, in currents and waves. Fractal patterns are patterns that repeat at scale. And some of the EEG data has indicated that our brains really like looking at fractal patterns. We get into a more sort of calm yet alert state when we're looking at fractal patterns. We also, again, know that anything we can do to engage our senses, for example, in landscape design, seems to be this kind of shortcut to people feeling terrific. But when we look at children, we see a whole different set of possible pathways for why people are happy outside. Of course, kids play when they're outside. They engage their curiosity. They kind of learn to follow their own instincts. They learn leadership skills. They learn self-regulation. They learn to get along well with each other. This is from a forest preschool, two different forest preschools actually that I visited in Scotland. And, I love that this little kid is carrying around a very sharp tree branch. He's learning how to use tools and objects, that in other environments may be sort of considered dangerous. This little girl is climbing a tree. One of the studies I really like suggests that in conventional play spaces, like urban playgrounds, the boys run around more than the girls. Of course, we know in general, kids aren't running around enough. But when we get to a natural play space like this, the girls are running around just as much as the boys. I don't think we tend to think of nature as having these kind of gender neutralizing effects. And so I just always love to point this out, that girls particularly seem to benefit from time outside. And it's a way for them to also develop skills that teach them to value their bodies for more than how their bodies just look. And of course, we know that body dysmorphia, a huge problem, especially among teenage girls, and it's just increasing like crazy. There's another pathway I'm really interested in. I write about it a lot, including in my most recent book, Heartbreak, which is the science of awe. And awe is an emotion that makes us really think about who we are in the universe. It makes us wonder what it is we're looking at, because maybe we don't totally understand it. It transcends our current frames of reference. It may be something a little bit unexpected, something amazing. We're like, wow, what is that? Just asking that question has been linked to major health benefits, including more pro-social behavior, right? When we're looking at something vast, we feel more humble by comparison, less individualistic. We tend to behave in ways that are more collective. For example, people looking at photos like this will give away lottery tickets in psychology games. They'll just act in ways that are less self-interested. This is from a river trip I took with some veterans with post-traumatic stress. Again, this is a brainwave measuring device. Some of this data seems to indicate that when we're in natural settings like this was a 4-day river trip in the wilderness in Utah, there's a kind of relaxing or lessening of activation in our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain, that's so engaged in kind of day-to-day tasks. It's also engaged in self-referential thinking, where we think about ourselves a lot. And we know that dials down a little bit after time outside. Not really sure where that activation is going instead, but it seems to be parts of our brains associated with things like empathy and creative thinking. We also know this is from the Human Connectome Project, that people who are very prone to feeling awe tend to have more connections kind of throughout their brains. They're making more connections between, again, this prefrontal area and their sensory and emotional centers in their brains. They're able to be more resilient, it turns out, during times of stress. Very significant for these times we're living in. Of course, the reality is most of us don't live in the wilderness. And so our challenge is to make nature better and more accessible where we all live. This photo is funny. This is from a really interesting brain study out of Stanford. This is not a wilderness area at the top. This is a city park. It's called the Stanford Dish. A psychologist sent participants to walk around that for 90 minutes. He also sent them to walk around a city street, busy city street, for 90 minutes. He measured their brains before and after. What he found in the urban walkers was that he was particularly interested in this part of the brain called the subgenual prefrontal cortex. That's a part of the brain associated with cycling negative thoughts, like rumination, which is linked to depression. And he found that in the urban walkers, that part of the brain stayed kind of the same in terms of activation and blood flow. But in the nature walkers, the city park walkers, that part of the brain showed a reduction. And in fact, the people who took the nature walk said that they were feeling fewer negative thoughts or having fewer negative thoughts after their walk. So this is a concept called the nature pyramid, kind of based on the food pyramid that we used to have in our country. And the idea is that there are different benefits at different levels of exposure to nature, kind of that the benefits rest on a dose curve. At the highest would be our wilderness trips, where we can really think about healing things like grief and trauma. The middle of the pyramid, Finland and the UK have been doing some really interesting studies here, showing that about 2 hours a week of nature exposure seems to be kind of optimal for preventing depression and for maximizing mental and physical health. But our bread and butter, is really the bottom of the pyramid here. That's where we live. That's our nearby nature. That's our street trees, our school grounds, our landscaping, our neighborhoods. And we know that there are tremendous benefits at that level. Of course, the pandemic really made this clear. There's some really interesting studies kind of in real time coming out of that. We know during the lockdowns, everyone wanted to go outside. Not everyone had equal access to safe spaces and to spaces that were not crowded. So there was a big question of social equity and social justice in terms of who really got to benefit from nature outside. But some of the studies are indicating that even just having access to a window box, being able to look out your window at trees and greenery, seem to be linked to a significant drop in not only depression and anxiety, but also in loneliness, which I think is really interesting and kind of underappreciated, in some of this data, that people who feel a little bit connected to non-human beings can have an alleviation of loneliness. This is from the Joplin, Missouri tornado in 2011, very devastating tornado, 140 lives lost, a lot of structures damaged. And the way the community has come back together after this is to build parks, replant trees, build habitat for butterflies. And I'm interested in this term. We talk about biophilia, but now in the wake of disaster and community disaster and collective trauma, there's this idea of urgent biophilia, that we need to, as cities and towns and communities, we need to be stockpiling trees. We need to have parks available, just as we have hospital beds and ventilators available. I love the slide. This is from a playground that has been greened in West Philadelphia. It's part of the city there that is very underserved. This park is now open on weeknights. It's open on weekends, and it serves 6,000 people in this community. The mission of the Trust for Public Land, which built this park, being that everyone should have access to a 10-minute walk of a park. Currently, the United States, 100 million people do not have access to a 10-minute walk of a park. So I think it's an aspirational goal. You all are already very connected to greenery, I'm sure, and to plants, but these are some tips I have, again, for optimizing some of the data, especially for those of us who live in cities. And I'll just run through them quickly. Walking in the morning, if possible, helping to reset your circadian rhythms, working near natural daylight. I have a little bit too much coming in through my window for Zoom, sorry about that. Minimizing human noise pollution by wearing headphones if you need to, piping in birdsong. We know there's a lot of data about how that makes us feel a little more alert and relaxed. Driving or walking, going out of your way sometimes to walk along nature-rich streets, lobbying for green schoolyards, more recess, we don't have enough. And when you do go outside, please take kids with you, because they like it and they need it. Unfortunately, they're very disconnected to nature. Eat and take breaks outside and cultivate that sense of awe, which science shows we can learn to get better at seeing for our own mental resilience. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to taking your questions later and to being on the panel. I will stop share. Okay.
Thank you so much, Florence. I would even say that, lovers of nature and being outside as landscape architects tend to fall within the same stress, staying indoors that, the rest of society tends to do. And so reading your book was, it seems very obvious, and yet we still don't do it. And I think a lot of your facts will really help us towards, making, we're really great at drawing, but we tend to fall flat and sometimes convincing. And so a lot of your facts that you found through scientific study and exploration have been very, very helpful. So if you have a question for Florence, please write it in the Q&A. It should be on the bottom a screen there. So I don't see any questions right now, but please don't be shy. But I'll start off with a question of my own. So sound pollution. It was really evident that, when planes stopped flying during the pandemic, that we didn't really realize how noisy our cities can be. And once we, found that the planes weren't flying over anymore, there was a sense of quietness that, now that they're back, it seems silly that we're still not addressing it. And you talk about, how hearing is really important to survival, and that we're losing it. And so I just wonder if you found any research on soundscapes, on sound pollution, and if it's getting implemented in any cities or projects that you're aware of.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, there's so much fascinating research about how our bodies have a stress response when we hear motor sounds and loud rumbling noises, right? That was an important alerting sense for us in our past. Even when we're sleeping, we have a stress response to airplanes overhead. And I was really fascinated by how good landscaping can change the acoustic environment. So there were some really interesting projects I visited in the center of Seoul in South Korea. Incorporating a lot of plant barriers, vegetative barriers, and also water sounds to really drown out the more disturbing sounds of traffic and urban noise. I mean, I could go on with lots of studies, but I do think that sound design is something we don't always think about. In fact, I know we don't think about it, and it's it can actually make a huge difference in terms of people's stress levels. So for those of you who are working with acoustical engineers and so on, I commend you. I think it's really important work.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. So we have a question here from Kira. Is there a difference between day and night outdoor access on human health? And is there any research related to seeing the sky and stars at night?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm not really aware of studies looking at the benefits of night skies, but I do know that the National Park Service in the United States actually has a dark skies division. It's something that it is, putting some energy into. I do know that most kids growing up in the city have never seen the Milky Way, and we know also from kids who do see the Milky Way that it is a transformational experience, that they do feel the awe and the science of awe. I mean, the night sky is such a quick kind of, it's just such an easy way to have that feeling of awe. So the light pollution, we know it affects wildlife. I'm sure it affects our circadian rhythms as well. Yeah, important question.
Okay, we have another question here from C. I think this is Christine. Does the research show how a child's disconnection from nature impacts them? What does disconnection from nature look like? And how does a child immersed in nature compare?
Yeah, great question, important question. The journalist Richard Louv has coined the term nature deficit disorder. He has documented that it's linked to the increase in anxiety and depression among kids. We know that there are a number of diseases of the indoors. We know that there's an incredible, deficit of exercise, of vitamin D. We know that kids are increasingly diagnosed with nearsightedness, myopia, which seems to be directly related to the amount of sunlight that is no longer hitting their retinas. The retinas are actually partly, the shape is partly formed in the presence of sunlight. Things like anxiety, depression, obesity, these could all be considered in part diseases of the indoors.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. Another question here from Patrick. It would be advantageous, if we could put a dollar value on the cost of healthcare, crime, productivity in reference to in the same environments that you studied. This could give LAs more support in pushing for the integration of green spaces in our everyday lives. Have you seen anything like that? A cost value?
Yeah, a little bit. In fact, a great study came out of Toronto. It was a tree study. I believe it was Gregory Braffman who was the lead lead scientist on that, finding that street trees are, if you have a lot of street trees, I think it was like 11 or more street trees on a street, that was the equivalent of a $20,000 boost in income in terms of people's health, which I think is really fascinating. So there have been some efforts to put some dollar figures on the health gained by having some vegetation around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for people who see trees as an easy budget reducer, get rid of the trees and we'll just have a lawn. I think the value of that is definitely helpful. So one last question, Florence, is, so you are in Colorado again. So in your book, you had moved to DC. So when did you move back? And when did you decide to move back to where you
I'm
lived
very
before?
happy to be back in Colorado. My youngest daughter went off to college in the fall, and so I was an empty nester, had some freedom to go where I wanted. Saw her through high school, and so I came right back to Colorado. It's great to be here.
Great.
I did learn to appreciate a lot of things about DC, and there are a lot of things I love about living in cities. In fact, I'm in Denver now, which is still a big city, but I do have some easier access to the mountains.
Great. Great to hear. Okay, so that is all the questions that we have for today. So thank you again, Florence, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so to introduce Michael, Michael is one of the leading urban designers and planners in Canada. He brings 40 years of global experience in designing cities. He has written 6 books and is an adjunct professor at Simon Fraser University and Vancouver Island University. He is a lead instructor of the SFU Urban Design Certificate Program for 20 years and is a lead facilitator of the School of Development for the Urban Development Institute. He is a fellow of the Canadian Institute of Planners and a former president of BCSLA. He is also president of the MVH Urban Planning and Design Inc. that received numerous provincial and national awards for their innovative planning and urban design work. In 2020, Michael received the Research and Innovation Award from OALA. He has a BLA from U of G and a Master's of Landscape Architecture and Urban Design from Harvard. So Michael has been busy over the last 20 years. And based on his 2022 book, Public Realm, The New Maker's Handbook, Michael's presentation today addresses the key challenges for landscape architects, which is transforming the public realm into the core framework for future cities. So everyone, please help me welcome our virtual education session speaker, Michael von Hausen.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. I'm originally from Ottawa, but I thank Florence for her presentation. Super inspiring. And hopefully I'll build on that and I'll share with you the awe of public realm and its potential. I'm surrounded, I'm living out in Ocean Park in White Rock, South Surrey, and I'm surrounded by 150-foot cedars. And I just recently, a few minutes ago, opened the window to actually smell the roses, as they say. So this aspect, what I'd like to do today, and I've created the Great Communities Institute to actually better connect urban design with real estate development. I'm in the sphere where I'm working with developers, municipalities, landscape architects, and engineers to create the next great communities. I'd like to start with a little story, because we're going through today in quick tempo, over 20 minutes, 3 transformative questions, 14 placemakers, and 10 transformative strategies for public realm. And this all started off with last year. I was designing, actually 2 years ago, I was designing a new course, Public Realm, for SFU. And I found through my research that it was light on, to Florence's point, the science of creating urban places. And through my research, I realized certain questions. As landscape architects, we have an incredible opportunity here. And I'd like to start by saying, expand his PowerPoint. Oh, yes, thank you. Good. So full screen. Good. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael. That's perfect.
Good. Everybody, how's the sound? Good?
It's perfect.
Okay, good. So today I'd like to introduce you to my perspective of public realm, because my practice and my teaching, much of it focuses on streets, in developing the spaces and places in between. So let's first examine some fundamental questions of urban, suburban, and rural placemaking. So if we change the assumptions and elements, we change the results. Very important. So the first question: if we reversed the approach to city building, what would happen? Imagine if we designed the city's places first and place the buildings within the network. Call it the reverse approach. And I do that in my practices, especially in suburban greenfield developments that I admittedly still do, but I start with the land. It speaks to me. As we know with First Nations, that's a primary driver of spirit of place. Second question: what if we realized over 50% of the city was public, changed from car-centric to pedestrian-centric, a whole new world under our feet? And when we add streets, parking lots, existing parks, and so forth, in fact, we have the majority of our city as owned by the public. So that is a compelling value proposition to reshape our cities and to bring nature into every component of our design. Question 3: what if we looked at the public realm from 3 lenses: social, economic, and ecological? We tend to look at public realm as a residual. Oh, it's extra space. Put something into it, decorate it. Actually, don't design it, because we regard it psychologically as residual space in many of our projects. So I want to start with inspiration. The 14 makers of place. What I discovered in my practice and my research is that we're really light in our approaches to designing public realm. And here are 14 components that we can consider, starting at the top. And these consider both social, economic, and ecological dimensions of place. They apply differently to different sites, and they require a separate approach to place keeping, that is, keeping the important things of public realm and then adding certain other elements. And in some cases, taking those things away that are negative. So we start at the top, and I'll just be very concise here because it's just touching on individual subjects in my book. Location, purpose, program. Program is one of those things that we tend to gloss over, and they're so important in deep programming, especially working with the community to help us design the place. The aspect of meaning, fundamental. to us coming back to that space or place. Space is what you go through. Place is a destination. The idea of vitality, bringing it to life, pushing out darkness and bringing in light. Flexibility, especially in Canada. Much of our landscape goes white for 6 months. And how do we actually bring life through the 4 seasons? The elements that we add to the public realm, the comfort aspect, hugely important. Do we feel comfortable? Is that space an inclusive space? Connection, both internally and externally, very, very important. 5 senses design. Think of that every time, the next time you're doing a design for a place, think of the 5 senses. Sight, smell, taste, feeling, etc. Enclosure, very important to human comfort. And to Florence's points, this aspect of decreasing your heart rate, bringing nature into that and making it comfortable. The focus in the place. What is the purpose of the place? Coming back to that second element. The care. When we reflect care, that is not beyond maintenance, how we have pride in stewardship of our local places. It's hugely important to make people comfortable and respectful. Now, Florence used the word awe. I used the word, I finished with this wow factor. And the wow factor can be small or big, but it really creates that, whether it be a piece of public art, an aspect of sensitive and the 5 senses design, this aspect of fragrance in the spring is so, so important to create that aspect of meaning and memory. So if we, give me a second here, if we go to the next slide, if we combine those 3 factors, this is Brentwood Town Center that I had the privilege of initiating in terms of a concept urban design framework. We start to combine social diversity, economic vitality, and environmental integrity. And that brings us to what I call the C approach. So let's now take those 3 questions, 14 elements of making place, into 10 transformative strategies. The first, develop a transformative street. It's a project I did in Nelson, British Columbia, where I showed the transition by pedestrian friendly and also still with cars to a full program street that can be converted in an hour or 2 with 24-hour public washrooms, smart wayfinding, 4-season programming. When I say, when you're designing something, give it a name, give it something of memory. And finally, if you improve, I know as landscape architects, we tend to stay to the greenscape when in fact we're designing, helping design cities in a collaborative way. So if you improve the building edges, it's been proven to bring new visitors up to 70%. So increasing your pedestrian flow and increasing your stickiness of place can increase your sales, that is the economic side, of 15 to 25%. So what if we took projects for public spaces and we divided those into 4 seasons? We created 10 activities in each of the 4 seasons, what I call deep cultural and social programming. We'd create an incredible place that is vibrant, not only 8 hours a day, but possibly 16, as we heard in the last presentation. This aspect of select and effective lighting, super important. In the bottom left-hand corner is my daughter's new golden retriever. So if we think of inclusiveness, how can we include everyone and exclude no one? A real challenge in our parks and public realm planning. Wow. This aspect of create special, memorable places, both big and small. Southeast Falls Creek has the Big Sparrow. It has a great story behind it. And it's something special, creating memories and photo ops and so forth. Important, but from a kid's standpoint, you can't climb on it. And that sometimes is challenging. The graphic I have is from an award-winning international competition I was involved in China. And I did this graphic, and it was about special places in the city, both institutional places, open spaces, middle school, high schools, and so forth, connected by a green and blue way network. So you can see how powerful this is in terms of inviting the community to alter its orientation from car-centric to transit and walking and bike-centric. Create the network and we'll transform the cities. Number 4, strengthen the businesses and culture along the edges. Really important. I mentioned before that aspect of strengthening the edges on main streets and so forth. You see in the top left-hand corner, these are energy efficient workshops for First Nations artists in Whitehorse, Yukon. They're powered by solar panels. They're totally portable. They're colorful, and they animate a space. Again, they can be temporary or permanent, but we have to learn how to create temporal and permanent landscapes. In other words, changing those places from food trucks to home hardware. I did the Osoyoos town center plan with my team, and this home hardware, it is spilling out on the street. It has basement and main floor. It is a regional center of commerce and socialization. Bottom left-hand corner, mixed use again in Whitehorse. Business on the first floor, residential above. And then Bozeman, Montana. The idea of a children's museum to include everybody, exclude no one. Because once you draw the kids in, the parents follow. Now to facts. Look at this. Everybody, I've been, again, working on outdoor sidewalk patios for now, I guess, 20 years or so. But look at this with the pandemic, 50 times the income as compared to parking. Unbelievable. So in Toronto, the aspect of extending uses outside has exponentially increased income. I would assume, again, it's not specified who gets the income, but I would assume it's income to the restaurant. So any kind of fee for creating that outdoor space is minimized by the increase in revenue. So embrace the sidewalk, embrace the street. Now in Canada and in Colorado, and I lived in Evergreen, Colorado for a year above Denver, the aspect, and Denver is exposed to this too, this extreme winter conditions. How can we convert outdoor spaces to indoor spaces? Top right is my community of White Rock, British Columbia, where this is a hotel that has, and the wonderful thing about sliding or garage doors, you can open and close them. And it's the center of social activity. Bottom left is, again, cooling in the summer with climate resilience. We have to transform spaces. And this is an outdoor patio with a cooler, call it a translucent material. During those hot summer days, people can still sit outside. Number 7, create conservation corners. In any city now, we have bulges. They're called bulges or traffic calming mechanisms. I think they're totally underutilized. We have to work with our engineers to animate them. And what could they look like? Let's look at Nelson. This is a classic bulge that is essentially stripped? How can we convert them and manage them as part of greening our cities, adding sculptural furniture, bike racks? Most cities are under bike racked and under greened. So how can we transform those, call it conversation corners, where people can meet and greet? And then on the right-hand side, underutilized space in Nelson, how can we animate that with overhead structures, the community tables? Have the local merchants manage the movable chairs. So again, they transform, they attract people. They can, with movable chairs, you can create your own intimate conversations and interact. Number 8, look at what they did in Kelowna. They simply transformed the angled parking to parallel parking, and they added another 2.8 meters to the street, converting a sidewalk into what I term a promenade, a place where you can walk, stroll, eat out, etc. So it becomes a multifunctional space, which was once just a unifunctional space of moving through. Now, let's just go back to that, the sidewalk. Now let's look at the entire street. If we think of 50% public realm, and we're converting a city, a suburban area, to a pedestrian balanced public realm, what does that look like? The cars are visiting the street. The sidewalk is expanded. These are parking, what we refer to as parking patios. And the bollards can be moved in and out to animate and transform the street. But you can see here where the balance, pedestrian space, becomes an equal or dominant player. Let's look at Vancouver when they've done this. Look at what happens to the feel, the safety, the multifunction of the spaces where you move through. It's a huge transformation. We have to consider that. Just keep those double row of trees in mind as we move forward. Number 9 of 10, create stage sets for everyday activities. You know, you can see in Medicine Hat, Alberta on the top right, wow, are they into chess? Whether it be kids playing with the kids learning how to play chess in a large scale, or someone having their own personal game of chess starts to animate. I love pianos in spaces. Come play. In other words, animate the space with personal stories, and everyone can be part of the entertainment. In the bottom left, you see in Quebec City, where on a church site on Sundays, they bring in artisan, again, flex uses. And so they can transform a space and it becomes an economic generator. And then finally, I love this in Drumheller, Alberta, the place of the dinosaurs and the Badlands, how they've used characters to animate and bring to life public art. Finally, number 10. When we're talking about factors, and in the 1990s, I had the privilege to work with the City of Vancouver as their first senior landscape architect, and we added a second row of trees to the street. And those of you out there saying, well, how did Michael do this? Well, we had one on the public side, that is within the public right-of-way, and then another row of trees on the private side within the 4.5 meter setback. And actually the Parks Department said, well, how will the inside or private side actually survive? Because, oh, we'll water the outside, but they won't water the inside. Well, the strata, as you see in the actual existing situation, they retain those trees and maintain them. So think of this: when you double the row of trees on both sides of the street, you double the canopy. And you can see from planting those, the benefits are there's a factor between planting trees and their value, maintaining them by a factor of 1,000. In Calgary, for instance, I was visiting with Canada Lands, and the project manager, I said, what does that tree contribute to that duplex? And without hesitation, Mark told me 25,000 aside. So trees have economic value, they have medicinal value, and they are the lungs of the city. In Portland, there was a recent study you can see where that, in fact, it created less mortality among humans living nearby. So they have these benefits that are that I think call us forward as landscape architects to inform the public that these are the lungs of the city. We need them. They aren't luxury, but required. So I'll leave it at that. And if you're interested, my books are on my website. And if you're really interested in the book, I'd like to offer, you can email me at vhausen@telus.net, and I can send you a digital copy for your own use. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm already excited about, how we can transform our streetscapes here in Saskatoon. And I was going to actually ask as your first question here is, where is the best place to pick up your book? So thank you for also providing a bit of a discount there. And you will be talking as well here in Saskatoon. So can you give us a little bit of a snippet of your lecture then?
Oh, actually, I'm only talking now.
Oh, okay.
I'm only talking as a pre-conference, but I will be as co-chair of the National Awards of Excellence. I will be running a program, and I think it's the first of its kind, where we will be with the award-winning firms, and we're going to run a special session to talk about all sorts of things that I call it the backstories behind the awards. So I look forward to everyone, if they can, come to that, because I think we're always trying to find, I know in my practice that I try to say every project should be considered award-winning. In other words, excellent, most importantly. So I'll be there, but I won't be giving us another session.
Okay.
On that, if you're in British Columbia and you want to come to the Planning Institute of British Columbia provincial conference at the end of May, I will be doing a pre-conference 3-hour session with 40 professionals.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
So first question, and again,
Yep.
Everyone, please don't be shy. So if you have any questions for Michael, please add them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So my first question is this 50% percentage of the city as being public. So do you have an understanding of what we're at now? Are we 20% typically public at this moment?
That's an excellent question. Now I'll go to the instructor mode. Think of it, in Saskatoon, for instance, a normal right-of-way, if it's a local street, is 66 feet or 20 meters. 50% of that is 10. When we divide that into 2 sidewalks, it's 5 meters on either side. So think of this innovation. Could you imagine if you moved that 5 meters from on either side of the street as the sidewalk area and the buffer? You only had 1 sidewalk on one side of the street. That's 10 meters. That's a linear park going down your street, because I don't believe in every situation do we need sidewalks on both sides of the street. It's unsustainable and all that stuff. But could you imagine you have 10 meters, double row of trees, you would have a linear park moving through your neighborhood. on every, it doesn't have to be on every street, but it's just an idea. In a downtown, it might be 100 feet wide, right? I'm working in a rural town in Alberta. It has 100-foot right of way because of carriages in the early 1900s. If you divide that in two, that's 50 feet on 50 feet for public realm, 25 feet on either side of the street. And to answer your question, we're at maybe a 10-foot sidewalk, a 12-foot sidewalk. So it would be doubling the amount. Now that's an aspirational 50%, but I use that in a lot of my designs because then if we're doing half that or 3/4, we're moving towards the double row of trees, the linear park stroll experience. This isn't residual space. This is, these are places where you can extend uses outdoors, still have the clear space, and really important to maintain a clear space for pedestrians of about 2.5 meters or 7 or 8 feet. In other words, this is the space they move through. I hope that was helpful.
That was great, Michael. I hope everybody takes that and goes to their local RM or city and try to make that happen. That'd be amazing. So I do have a question here from an anonymous attendee. They ask any tips for dealing with the operational maintenance constraints that are often placed in public realm design approval, especially when attempting to go above and beyond typical street trees and hardscape.
I'll take a deep breath on that one, and because it's think of this, and I don't think we, as landscape architects, we don't think of this in our projects, or many of you do, that in fact the capital cost is doubled when you add the maintenance cost to it. So the question is, for instance, do you retain an extra inventory of street lights or pedestrian lighting? And that becomes an issue. So well, I see this always in public realm. It's a partnership between the community. Can they steward certain things, or are there certain donations from the community that they make a commitment to the place, whether it be a park or a linear park, etc. The city or community itself has to commit to a long-term life cycle maintenance program. So think of your materials, think of your elements as sustainable, resilient elements, rather than to do less to create more, and then phase your improvements. So it's a partnership between community, city, and then others, corporate, right? In other words, get corporate contributions, because it not only, to my point of those 14 placemakers, care is so important. Once the care decreases, that's when the first indication of abuse is tagging. In other words, graffiti on different parts, and that's where monitoring and evaluation comes in, where we as landscape architects get maybe additional budget to monitor over a year or two to make sure it's a resilient design.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. Any more questions? I see. I would think too that, adding to our streetscapes will also present flexibility for the commercial owners on that street. Really provide that prosperity and economic wealth as well.
There we are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael. We are so happy to have you here today virtually, and we are excited to see what you have in the future. I know I will be buying that book for myself. So thank you very much, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Do stay online for a few more minutes. We have a few other slides and another presentation to share with you. Alors, merci encore tout le monde. Restez en ligne encore quelques instants. Nous avons encore quelques présentations et une vidéo à partager avec vous. Catherine, please do go ahead and share that video now.
look forward to seeing you June 15th to 17th in Saskatoon for the CSLA-SALA Congress. Thank you to Maghlin Site Furniture, our title sponsor for the event. Nous nous réjouissons de vous voir du 15 au 17 juin à Saskatoon pour le congrès AAPC-SALA. Merci à Maghlin Site Furniture, notre commanditaire principal pour l'événement. The Congress will kick off with a reception at the Remy Modern Gallery, where you'll sample cuisine from the famous Hearth Catering Company, who are known for their delicious potato dill pierogies, and tour the gallery overlooking the river. Nous vous accueillons avec une réception à la Remy Modern Gallery, où vous dégusterez des mets de la célèbre Hearth Catering Company, réputée pour ses pierogies de pommes de terre et à l'aneth, et visiter la galerie surplombant la rivière. Keynote speakers Candace Savage and Jolie Big Eagle Kikatwe will delight you with the natural history of the prairies and its connection to art and culture. 2 days of educational programming will also pique your curiosity. Les orateurs principaux Candace Savage et Jolie Big Eagle Kikatwe vous feront découvrir l'histoire naturelle des prairies et son lien avec l'art et la culture. 2 jours de programmation éducative piqueront également votre curiosité. Visit the Batoche National Historic Site in Wanuskewin Heritage Park. Learn about pollinators on a walking tour. See the Meewasin Valley by bicycle. Cruise the Prairie Lily Riverboat or take a turn on a party bike called the Pedal Pub. And don't forget the Black Fox Distillery Tour. Did anyone say gin? Visitez le lieu historique national de Batoche et le parc Wanuskewin. Apprenez à connaître les pollinisateurs lors d'une visite à pied. Découvrez la vallée de Meewasin en vélo, faites une croisière sur le Prairie Lily Riverboat ou faites un tour sur un vélo de fête appelé le Pedal Pub. Et n'oubliez pas la visite de la distillerie Black Fox. Aimez-vous le gin? End your Congress by meeting the Awards of Excellence recipients at a workshop and at the Awards Gala, where we will also celebrate the newest class of the College of Fellows. Terminez votre congrès en rencontrant les lauréats des prix d'excellence lors d'un atelier et d'un gala des prix où nous célébrons également la nouvelle classe du Collège des Fellows. See you there! Au plaisir de vous voir!
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Merci tout le monde de vous être joints à nous. We hope to see you in June in Saskatoon. On espère vous voir en juin à Saskatoon.